What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the channel, and I have a super unique one for you today. As a lot of you probably know, Halo Infinite early released their multiplayer recently this past week, marking the 20th anniversary of Halo. And if you're like me, you probably grew up playing these games. So you know, on this channel, we do typically Python and other software tutorial series. We've done apps, we've done widgets, and we've done just base Python programming, as well as a few games. And I thought what would be super fun in honor of the Halo release is if we did a little bit of a Halo kind of Space Invaders style game. I'm going to start every video in the series by kind of demoing the game so that you guys see what the end goal is and hopefully think that that's something worth building to. So I'm going to demo the game that we built here a little bit, and I am pretty proud of it. You can hear just kind of the epic soundtrack in the background. I've left instructions for how to play and said, you know, click anywhere to begin. So let's get into it. We've got a little some soundtrack playing in the background. I've got some sound effects. The enemies in each wave are automatically spawned in, and they kind of randomly pick heights to spawn in from, and I've set them up with a specific speed to come in at. And I've added some impact sound effects that maybe aren't the greatest. I've also made it to where each wave increases the number of enemies, so you can see we're on level 2 now, and we should have more enemies. I got these little 8-bit Halo icons from the internet. And in the series, in the actual tutorials, I'll talk through kind of how to grab images, how to scale them all to the size that you want, as well as there's a free tool on the internet for removing the background from images. So if you've dealt with kind of the super annoying, like you pull in an image you want to use and you have that like white rectangle around it, no worries. We'll go over how to do that too.
Game over.
All right, so there we go. So that's the game demo, and whatever stage of the project you're at and following along with, hope you're enjoying it. Be sure to leave a like on the channel, a subscribe to the channel if you are enjoying it, and good luck with your code. Okay, part 2 in our Halo Space Invaders tutorial series here is going to be getting the player drawn on the screen and setting up the player controls. So just like before, how we grabbed a background image for the game, grab your player image for the game. And I am going to copy the whole thing we had with the pygame.transform and scale and everything, because if you grab an image from the internet, odds are it won't be exactly the size that you want. If you built custom graphics, then maybe it is. But in any case, grab your image. Mine is called chief.png. I typed in 8-bit Master Chief to Google Images, downloaded it, went to a website called like removebg.io or something like that. I typed into Google remove background from images, did that, and I got this image, which is huge, but it looks sweet. It has no background. And so it's just in the same directory as before with the Halo BG, but it's called chief.png. And then this one, we obviously do not want to scale it to the size of the entire screen. That would look pretty ridiculous. So what we are going to do is we are going to scale it to a smaller size. I've played around with it a little bit. I like the look of 80 by 90. It fits pretty well in the screen. And again, use your image, scale it however you want. And this is just something that I found works for me. So if you want to follow along pretty exactly with this, then that's how we're going to be doing it. But okay, so that's the image. That's my spiel about the image. And what we're going to do now is we're going to create a new class, because I want the enemies and our player to kind of use some common things like being drawn onto the screen, movement. There are things that are going to be not just specific to the player. They're going to be specific to the player and the enemy. And so you'll see this a lot more once we do go and we add enemies to the game as well as just our player. It's going to be useful to set it up this way. So even though it takes maybe a little bit more time on the front end, we're creating, and it doesn't need parentheses like that, my mistake, but we're creating code that's going to speed up the definition of everything else for the rest of the game. So we create a class, and it looks like it thinks I've made a typo here. I don't think I have. and we're gonna call the, I think it was just because I had those parentheses in the beginning. But what every enemy and our player is going to call in common, we give them an X and a Y coordinate, and they're all going to start with health of 100. So even though we want them to have health, we can just say health equals 100 right in there. We don't need to just pass it in as a variable with no default value. So then we're just going to do some self.x equals x. And if you're unfamiliar with object-oriented programming in general, there are some tutorials on this channel that can help get you a little bit caught up to just why classes work this way, why functions work this way, but I'm going to assume you have a little bit of knowledge. We're essentially taking the variables we pass in and assigning them to variables that we can use inside of functions inside of our class. So health is going to be equal to health. For now, we're going to say self.image equals none because I'm not typing. Self.image equals none because for the player and for the enemies, this is where it's going to differ a little bit. And then we'll say self.shot is also equal to none. So we're going to create some code later for tracking if they've shot, and then create a library of all of their shots. And to start, those are both going to be empty, but we're setting ourselves up for creating code that's going to have multiple projectiles coming from one character. And then we'll also create a cooldown variable tracking how long between shots, and we'll set that equal to 0 initially. And then the only other thing we're going to do for all characters is we're going to draw them. And so all we're going to do when we call a character is we need to say, instance of the character dot draw, and then say draw it onto the window. And so this is where we can actually just say blit it and then use image, and then for the coordinates self.x and self.y. So when we get into creating the player and actually creating the instance of this class, that will make a little bit more sense. But essentially all we have to do now to get the image onto the screen is create our player and then pass in an x and a y coordinate and call the dot draw function inside the character class, and that's going to take care of everything for us. So now, because the player is unique, we're going to create a subclass, and this class character is going to, or the class player is going to inherit all of the properties of the class character. So that's why when defining this, we say, okay, this is going to be the player class, but right here we're saying inherit everything that the character class has already. And then in our init function, our initialization of this, we're going to do just the same self x, y, and we'll bring in health default to 100. And we're going to just call, so you use super.init when you want to bring in the init function of a previous. So this is pretty nice. We're just saying x, y, and health, and then we don't have to type out self.x, self.y, self.health, all this same business. We're just calling this whole init function inside of this one. So that's nice. It saves us some lines of code, saves us some typing. And now we're actually going to, instead of self.image equals none, we're going to say player. So before we created the static constant all caps player, and now self.image equals player, even though we said none up here, this comes after calling the init function, so this is going to overwrite it and give it the player. And then for self.shot, this is going to be where we say what image, and if you think back to the tutorial, we had the player shooting bullets, right? Because Master Chief, he shoots like the human-looking guns. So I have an image for a bullet. I think I called it bullet. And you can see it's facing vertically right now. In the game, we want to play horizontal. So it is going to use essentially this same transform, but we're going to do even another transform after that. So let's go ahead and bullet equals pygame.image.load, and it's going to be images / bullet.png, just like that. I think that's good. I'm not sure. It wants to format it all weird. Oh, it's because I didn't put an equals in there. Alrighty, we're going to play around with transforming it once we're actually shooting it. For now, I'm just going to leave it like that. But that's what we're giving in the shot here is what that character's projectile is going to look like. So let's leave it as that for now. And then we're going to use something called mask. This is how you get really accurate hit boxes. If your image or character is really close to a rectangle, you might be able to use like Pygame's default collision detection. But it converts your image, no matter what, into a rectangle. So if you have a shape like a person or an alien that's not perfectly rectangular, you'll get really frustrating points in your game where it's not actually detecting to see if there's a pixel in that image. It's just taken the outer dimensions of your image and said, okay, this is the rectangular hitbox. If you use pygame.mask.fromSurface, you can actually tell it, okay, look at an image, and in this case it's self.image, and create a mask, which is going to be equal to the actual pixels, the part of that rectangle it's grabbed that are occupied by pixels. So mask is a lot more accurate way of doing a hitbox in Pygame. So that's why we're doing it this way. We say self.image, and then we're going to say self.maxHealth, because part of the game is drawing a health bar underneath the character that's going to show how much they've been damaged. And for that reason, we're going to have, a red max health bar, and then the part that's actually occupied by their current health will be green and laid over top of it. So these are things that just the player need. But now, to actually get one on the screen, we just come down into underneath where we defined main text, and we define our player. And so player is going to be equal to player class. And then we are just going to give a starting X and a starting Y. And we'll do 100 and 600. That looks pretty good. And then we're going to, down in the update window, this is where we put player.draw. And we give it, I believe the only variable it needs is window. And so we say window. All right, and let's just run this real quick. Actually, this needs to be above the update function. Sorry. If you draw anything after the update function, it's not going to show up on your screen. So let's take a look here. What did I do? Okay, sorry about that. Just go with images /bullet. The backslash is the new line character, and it's also inside of a string. It interprets the next character literally. So just use images /bullet, and I know I used backslash up here as well, but you can swap them all out with /. You see the way up here in the caption we have backslash and then a parentheses. That's saying interpret the apostrophe. That's saying interpret the next character literally. In defining a file path, you can use / or backslash, but it gets a little goofy in strings. So my mistake, sorry. But moving on, let's see. So we've got our bullet, and now if we run this, we should see our chief on the screen. There he is, little guy in the bottom left, but he can't move yet because we haven't set up player controls. So that's what we'll do next, and that'll be the end of this video. But so this part's actually really easy. We can go down, and since we want to be able to move up and right at the same time, or down and left at the same time, we're going to keep track of all the keys that have been pressed. And we're going to do that by creating a dictionary. So we're going to say active keys equal, and it's going to be pygame.key.getPressed. And this function is getting everything that's been pressed on the keyboard right now. And we're going to start looking at individual characters to see if they exist in the dictionary. So we're saying if active keys pygame.k, and I'm going to make this a WASD game. You can use the arrow keys if you want. Just instead of key k_a, you're going to be using k_up, _down, _left, _right. And then we're also going to check and make sure that the player is still on the screen. So the player has the function X and Y, right? And we're going to check to see if I'm letting you move to the left, you need to still be on the screen. So we're going to create a new variable called player speed. And this is something you can tweak to kind of set how powerful you want the player to be, how quickly you want him to be able to maneuver. 5 felt pretty good when I was making it before. And so what we're checking to see is if and the player's current position after we change it. So if you're using A, you're going to the left. So you're saying X minus the speed needs to be greater than 0. If that is valid and you are pressing the A key, then that means we're going to let you move. So we're going to just take the X position and we're going to subtract it away from the player's speed. And I'm going to copy that exact little routine here for 4 times, and we're going to do A, and then we're going to do D, so that's left and right, and then we're going to do W, and we're going to do S, and that'll be up and down. And then this one, we're going to check that player speed and player X. So player X, now it's plus player speed, but we also have a wide player, so we need to add some width. And this will change a little bit depending on your character that you're using. If you are following along with my dimensions as well, plus 70 looks pretty good for the right edge of the screen. But this may be something for you to just tweak. But obviously it doesn't need to be greater than 0 now. It needs to be less than the width of the screen. And if that is valid, then we're going to move it to the right. So now for up and down, instead of looking at player X, we're looking at player Y, right? So player Y, player Y, player Y, player Y. And what we're going to check for W is if you can go up. And so we're going to check that if player Y minus player speed is greater than 0, just like before. Because remember, in the Pygame coordinate system, the top left corner of your game is 0. So it's actually kind of counterintuitive, but if you're going up, you're decreasing your height in terms of pixels. So that's why you subtract player speed from player Y. And now we're going to take a look here at down, and so it's going to be the opposite. It's going to be a lot more like when we're going right. We're checking if player Y plus the player speed plus 80. Again, that's kind of because of the dimensions I set my player up for, and this is absolutely something you can kind of guess and check and then put it on the screen and make sure it's functioning okay. So right here, I believe we have 4 directional control that'll stop at the bounds of the screen, and it should work for our player. So let's go ahead and run it. All right, so we got the chief in the bottom left, and yep, I can do up and left, up and right, down. I can do multiple directions at the same time. If I hold left and down still at the same time, he doesn't go anywhere, obviously, because there is no control. He stops at a pretty good point on the right, stops at the top, bottom, and left. And so you can play around with your kind of extremities, just add and subtract a few pixels in those player controls. Since the bulk of this game is you hang out pretty far on the left and you shoot towards the right, this looks totally good for me, but you make it your own, tweak it however you want. In the next series, in the next episode in the series, we should be taking a look at adding some enemy waves, and pretty soon we'll be adding the shooting mechanism. We'll increment the score. We'll add waves. So we're getting there, but we've already got a playable game with a character in it. So hopefully you're enjoying this series. If you are, I appreciate a like on the video, a subscribe to the channel. It helps me out a ton to create tons more new content like this. And as always, good luck with your code, and thanks for watching. Thanks. Bye.